Hello my dear students and welcome once again to Zenith Academy Online. Today we are going to talk about peripheral nervous system, that is PNS. So I am going to explain you peripheral nervous system in a very detailed way. So stay glued till the end. Let's start, children. So we have already discussed this thing in our previous lectures that the nervous system consists of two, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system we have discussed already in detail. So today we will be talking about peripheral nervous system. So students, you should remember that peripheral nervous system is of two types, autonomic nervous system ANS or somatic nervous system SNS. Now autonomic nervous system also has two types, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So today I'll be teaching you in detail about all of this. So let's start. So what is peripheral nervous system? It consists of the nerves. Okay. Peripheral nervous system consists of the nerves that branch out from the brain and the spinal cord. So brain और spinal cord से निकलने वाली जो nerves है, उन सभी को collectively हम कहते हैं peripheral nervous system. Okay. So these nerves form the communication network between the CNS, that is the central nervous system, and the body parts. तो ये जो system of nerves है वो एक communication network की तरह act करती है between your central nervous system, that is your brain and the spinal cord, and all the parts of the body. Okay. Now what are somatic and autonomic nervous system? So peripheral nervous system is further divided into somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. So what is somatic nervous system? It consists of nerves that go to the skin and muscles. हमारी skin और muscles तक जो nerves जाती है, ठीक है, उस पूरे system को हम कहते हैं somatic nervous system. It consists of the nerves that go to the skin and muscles and it is involved in conscious activities. जो एक्टिविटीज हम वॉलेंटरली करते हैं, हमारे कॉन्शियस में रहकर करते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल लिफ्टिंग अ हैंड. ओके, सो व्हेन आई एम लिफ्टिंग अ हैंड टू राइट, ओके, और व्हेन आई एम लिफ्टिंग माय मोबाइल टू चेक इट, ओके, चेक द मैसेजेस इन इट. सो मैं अपनी इच्छा से ये कर रही हूँ. सो इट इज अ कॉन्शियस और वॉलेंटरी एक्टिविटी. So somatic nervous system consists of nerves that go to the skin and muscles and is involved in conscious activities. Now the autonomic nervous system consists of nerves that connect the central nervous system to the visceral organs. Visceral organs मतलब हमारे जो internal organs है, the big internal organs such as heart, stomach and intestine. तो autonomic nervous system कौन सा है बच्चों? Which consists the nerves that connect the central nervous system to the visceral organs like heart, stomach and intestine, and it mediates unconscious activities, that is involuntary action को जो control करती है, जैसे हमारी heart beat, right, our digestion, all those things are under autonomic nervous system. So I am repeating, somatic is conscious activities or voluntary activities इसको control करती है, and autonomic controls the unconscious or involuntary activities. So let's talk about somatic nervous system. Now parts of the somatic nervous system. तो somatic term कहाँ से आया? The term somatic is drawn from the Greek word soma, which means body. So it is this system that transmits information back and forth between the central nervous system and the rest of the body. तो सेंट्रल नर्वस सिस्टम से रेस्ट ऑफ द बॉडी इंफॉर्मेशन ले जाना और वापस वहां से लाना, ओके, इज अंडर सोमैटिक नर्वस सिस्टम. सो सोमैटिक नर्वस सिस्टम कंटेन्स two major type of neurons. I am talking about nerve cells. तो सोमैटिक नर्वस सिस्टम में दो major type of nerve cells हैं, which is sensory neurons. Sensory neuron को हम efferent neurons भी कहते हैं. We call them as efferent neurons as well. So sensory neurons, also known as afferent neurons, are responsible for carrying information from the body to the CNS, okay, to the central nervous system, which contains brain and spinal cord. So sensory neuron is afferent neuron. It carries information from the body parts to the central nervous system. Then we have motor neurons. They are also known as efferent, E-F-F-E-R-E-N-T. So see the spelling change. Sensory is efferent, A, and this is efferent, E. Okay. Now they are responsible for carrying information from the brain and the spinal cord to the muscles throughout the body. Okay. So it is opposite of sensory. So these are the type of neurons. So children get confused in between the types of neurons and between the types of nerves. So somatic nervous system contains of two nerves, cranial and spinal. That I will explain you. But right now you understand that somatic nervous system contains two type of neurons. Okay, sensory and motor. Now, the neurons that make up the somatic nervous system project outwards from the central nervous system and connect directly to the muscles of the body. And they carry signals from the muscles and the sensory organs back to the central nervous system. Okay? And it does through by the help of sensory neuron and motor neuron. Is this clear? Now, the body of the neuron, pay attention children, the body of the neuron is located in the central nervous system. Okay, that is the brain and the spinal cord. But the axon, what is axon? A portion of the neuron that carries nerve impulses away from the cell body. Okay, so the axon projects and terminates in the skin, sensory organs or muscles. I hope this is very clear to you. Now, let's talk about now the nerves in the somatic nervous system. First, we spoke about the nerve cells. Okay, these were the nerve cells. Wait, I'll go back. Wait. So, what are the neurons? Neurons are sensory neuron and motor neuron. But when I talk about the nerves, okay, it consists of two set of nerves. One is cranial and second is spinal. So let's talk about these two sets of nerves in the somatic nervous system. First, let's talk about cranial nerves. This is very important from examination point of view. You have to learn whatever is there in the slide by heart. Okay. Cranial nerves emerge from the brain. There are how many pairs of cranial nerves? 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Okay. So you don't have to learn all 12 of them. So you just have to learn few examples like sensory nerves. Okay. Like the olfactory. Olfactory means anything which has to relate with the smell is olfactory. So sensory like the olfactory nerve for nose. Optic is anything that deals with eyes. So optic for eyes and auditory for ears. Then motor nerves like ones going to the eye muscles. So those nerves that are going to the eye muscles are also part of cranial nerves. Then mixed nerves like those going to and coming from the face and the tongue. Okay. So sensory, motor and mixed nerves, these examples you have to learn. So from this slide, what you have to take? Cranial nerves emerge from the brain. There are how many pairs of cranial nerves? 12. Few examples are like this. Sensory, which includes olfactory for nose, optic for eyes and auditory for ears. And motor, which includes going to the eye muscles. Okay. And mixed, those going to and coming from both. They are going to the face and tongue and coming from the face and tongue. These are mixed nerves. Next is spinal nerves. As the name suggests, spinal, it has to relate with the spinal cord. So spinal nerves emerge from spinal cord. And there are how many pairs? 31. So 8 pairs are in the neck region, 12 pairs in the thorax region, and 5 pairs in the lumbar region, at the back, lumbar region. And 1 pair in the coccygeal region. Okay. Now you pay attention to this diagram. All of you pay utter attention here. This is a very important slide. A spinal nerve originates from the spinal cord. It starts from the spinal cord by the means of 2 roots, a dorsal root and a ventral root. So you see here, this is a cross section of a spinal cord. So can you see here a dorsal root and a ventral root? So they arise from a dorsal root and a ventral root. Each dorsal root has a ovoid dorsal ganglion. So each of them has a ovoid ganglion. Can you see this? This is a slightly swollen, okay, ganglion. So every spinal nerve is a mixed nerve. You have to understand that this spinal nerve that we are talking about is a mixed nerve. Okay, it is having both sensory and motor fibers. Now, at the junction of the two roots, the sensory and the motor fibers separate out. Can you see? This is the junction. Here they have separated out. Okay, this is sensory, afferent. Can you see afferent? And this is motor, which is efferent. So they are separate out at the junction. The sensory fibers continues in the dorsal root. So you can see this is continuing in the dorsal root. It is coming here in the dorsal root, and the motor fibers into the ventral root. So motor fiber is coming here in the ventral root. Both the roots enter the gray matter of the spinal cord. Now you are seeing that both of them are entering into the gray matter. Can you see this butterfly type of a gray matter? So both of them are reaching the gray matter. They are entering in the gray matter, and they end in the corresponding dorsal and ventral projecting horns of the gray matter. So if you see this butterfly type of a portion, this is the ventral horn, dorsal, and this is the ventral horn. Okay, so the afferent nerve will come in the dorsal horn, and this will come in the ventral horn of the gray matter. I hope this diagram is clear. So if there is a prick on the skin with a needle, so what do you see? The spinal nerve is there. It is carrying both the fibers. So the afferent or the sensory comes here. It reaches the gray matter of the spinal cord. This is the reflex arc. I will explain reflex arc in the reflexes session in the next class. But you understand like this, that the sensory nerve is, that is the afferent, is coming through the spinal ganglion and entering here in the dorsal root. And then there is interneuron, so it will send the message back to the muscles to remove the skin from the needle. Okay, so now through the motor or through the afferent, okay, it is coming and reaching the muscles. Are you getting this? Okay, now let's go ahead and understand what is somatic nervous system basically. So somatic nervous system plays a vital role in initiating and controlling the movements of your body. We just now studied that which part of the body does it handle. Okay, so now we know that it plays a vital role in initiating and controlling the movements of our body. The system is responsible for nearly all voluntary muscle movements, right? We now know it is voluntary, somatic is voluntary, it is related to muscles, so it plays a vital role in initiating and controlling the movements of our body. This system is responsible for nearly all the voluntary muscle movements as well as for processing sensory information. It helps in processing the sensory information also, which arrives via the external stimuli, including hearing, touch and sight. So whenever we hear something or when there is something touch, so these are the sensory information which is arriving. So the somatic nervous system is the one which is responsible for processing this sensory information as well. So there are two major roles. One is controlling and initiating the movements of our body and all the voluntary muscle movements, and then processing the sensory information that has come via any external, any environmental stimuli like hearing, touch and sight. Now let's talk about autonomic nervous system. Okay, we have studied in detail about somatic, now autonomic. So as the name suggests, autonomic, apne aap. So autonomic nervous system regulates a variety of involuntary, I have already told you, autonomic means involuntary body processes. So it regulates a variety of involuntary body processes that take place, including heartbeat, blood flow, breathing, body temperature and even the emotion response. Okay. So autonomic nervous system consists of pair of chains of nerves and ganglia on either side of the backbone के दोनों तरफ. This system controls the involuntary actions of the internal organs. You have to remember. Okay. Somatic for skin and muscles and autonomic for internal organs and involuntary. Okay. So you have to remember these keywords. Now, there are two parts of autonomic nervous system. Now, autonomic nervous system is of two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Let us study in detail about sympathetic and parasympathetic. So first is sympathetic. Okay. So nerves of the sympathetic system arise from the spinal cord between the neck and the waist region. So between the neck and the waist, this region of the spinal cord. Can you see? So they are arising from this region. Are you getting it? So the region is also very important from examination point of view. The sympathetic system nerves arise from the spinal cord between the neck and the waist region, and then they control these. I'll just read it for you, but then we will do it in detail also. So dilates the pupil. When we are talking about the eyes, it dilates the pupil. It inhibits the salivation. It relaxes the bronchi, accelerates the heartbeat. It inhibits the peristalsis movement and the secretions. It stimulates glucose production, and release, secretion of adrenaline and non-adrenaline. It also inhibits the bladder contraction and stimulate orgasm. So we will talk about all these later, but right now you understand कि sympathetic system, the nerves arise from the spinal cord between the neck and the waist region. Waist is आपकी जो कमर है, right? Now parasympathetic. Can you see where it is located? It is located at two places. One anteriorly in the head. So can you see here, anterior part of the head, and other posteriorly in the sacral region. Can you see here, below the tailbone, sacral region. Okay. Now the sympathetic कौन सा था बेटा? ये वाला जो यहाँ से arise होता है, neck and the waist region. So the sympathetic nervous system is stimulated by hormone adrenaline, which is secreted by the adrenal gland. We'll talk about all these glands in our upcoming lecture of endocrine glands, and this adrenal gland is located on the kidney. तो sympathetic nervous system को stimulate कौन सा hormone करता है? Adrenaline hormone, which is secreted by adrenal gland, which is located on the kidneys. Now, the sympathetic nervous system prepares our body for intense physical activity. So whenever there is a requirement of intense physical activity, like suddenly we have to run, okay, on seeing maybe a dog running after us or something. So this nervous system prepares our body for intense physical activity, and that is why it is referred to as fight or flight response. So suppose there is a dog who's chasing us. So this is a condition of fight or flight response, right? We will either have to fight with the dog or we will have to run. So this is the response that we will have, right? So our sympathetic nervous system prepares our body for this flight or fight response. Okay. But what does parasympathetic nervous system do? It has almost the exact opposite effect, and it relaxes the body and inhibits, मतलब रोकती है, inhibits or slows many high energy functions, right? So let's talk about these two in detail. Let's compare these two. So sympathetic is known as fight and flight, and parasympathetic is known as rest and digest nervous system. Okay, so these are the other two names. Sympathetic, fight and flight. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. So let's talk about sympathetic first. This is involved in fight, flight and freeze response. So suddenly if there's a lion in front of you, okay, you will not even think of fighting it or running away. You will freeze. So all these three are sympathetic. Okay, the sympathetic system prepares the body for any potential danger, right? The sympathetic system has shorter neuron pathways, hence a faster response time. So if you see a dog running after you, okay, you will have to think fast and act fast. So the neuron pathway are shorter and quickly you will have it will have a faster response time. Immediate आपको action लेना पड़ेगा, right? So sympathetic system has a shorter neuron pathway, hence it has a faster response time. This increases our heartbeat and our muscles tense up. So this is what is happening during a fight, flight or freeze response. The pupil, our eyes, the pupil of our eyes dilate to let in more light. We are just frozen or we are shocked. Okay, so we want to act. So what happens to our eyes? The pupil will dilate and will let in more light so that you are able to see clearly. The saliva secretion is inhibited, so you will not waste, your body will think accordingly and it will not do unnecessary actions. Right now you don't need saliva, right, in this condition. So saliva secretion is inhibited. So always remember, on fight, flight and freeze situations, adrenaline is released. So when you study your endocrine glands, you will know that in these situations adrenaline is released by adrenal glands, and hence more glycogen is converted into glucose because you need more energy to either run or to fight, right? So adrenaline is released by the adrenal glands and glycogen is converted into glucose, right? So all of this was about sympathetic. Now let us do some examples. So there's a diagram, I hope you are able to see it. So few examples we'll take. So what happens in a sympathetic response? What happens in sympathetic nervous system? The pupil will dilate. The heart, what happens to the heart? It increases the heartbeat. Now the airways, okay, from where we will take in oxygen, okay, the airways dilates and dilates the bronchial tubules so that we can take in more oxygen, right? Sweat glands, पसीना क्या होता है? पसीना छूटने लगता है, right? Whenever we are in a fright mode, the sweat glands will stimulate secretion. What happens to the liver? It increases the rate of conversion of glycogen to glucose, right? Because that is what liver does. Liver में ही होता है ना, conversion of glycogen to glucose. So it increases this rate. Digestive system will decrease the activity because we don't want the energy to go in digestion. So digestion system की activity decrease हो जाएगी, right? What happens to the adrenal gland? It stimulates the production of adrenaline because we want, this is an what do we call, this hormone is required in emergency. It's an emergency hormone, right? So adrenal gland stimulates the production of adrenaline. What happens to the uterus, the vagina? There is a vaginal contraction. And what happens to the urinary system? The bladder is relaxed, right, in sympathetic. So you should remember all this. Also remember, it happens here from your neck region to your waist region. Okay. Now let's talk about parasympathetic division or parasympathetic. So it is involved in maintaining homeostasis. Homeostasis means a balance, right? And it also permits the rest and digest response. So opposite of your fight, flight and freeze response is your rest and digest response, right? If you remember, in the sympathetic one, digestion slows down, right? Digestion slows down. But in the parasympathetic, it is the digestion, the rest and digestion happens, okay? So the parasympathetic system aims to bring the body to a state of calm. इसके पहले वाला excitement में ले जाता था, and now it is bringing the body to the state of calm. This has comparatively longer neuron pathway. सोच समझ के काम होता है, and hence a slower response time. This reduces the heartbeat because now we want to relax, so the heartbeat is reduced and the muscles will also relax. The pupil will also contract. Now more light is not entering. Saliva secretion will increase क्योंकि अब digestion, this is a digest response, right? So saliva secretion increases and digestion also increases. So let's see what happens in parasympathetic. Parasympathetic is reverse. So there the pupil was dilating, here it is constricting. Okay, so that less light enters and you are in a state of rest. Heartbeat slows down. Airways also constrict, it constricts the bronchial tubules. Liver stimulates bile release. Okay, now the bile is released. Blood vessels also constrict. Digestive system, it stimulates the activity. Uterus is now relaxed. And in the urinary system, what happens? It increases the urinary output. Now you are in a relaxed position. So now you will go and urinate. Okay, it increases the urinary output. So let's read this table. This is extremely important. So let's talk about sympathetic and parasympathetic. What happens to the different structures of the body? Okay. So let's read this. So what happens to the pupil of the eye? In sympathetic, it dilates. In parasympathetic, it constricts. Okay. We have already done all this, but just a revision. In case of heart, this increases the rate and the force, but here it is a relaxed, so it decreases the rate. Lung bronchioles, here there is a dilation, here there is a constriction. It is same as eye, because now the same way eye wants to take in more light, similarly we want to take in more oxygen. So here there is dilation, now here there is constriction. Gut wall, okay, the intestines, what happens? Decreased mobility. Now the peristalsis movement is decreased in the first one, and second it increased motility. Okay. Now sphincter muscles of the intestine, gut sphincters, they constrict, and here in parasympathetic they relax. What happens to the bladder? Bladder is relaxed here, and here bladder is constricted. So if the bladder is constricted, now the output is there, urine output is there. Now, what happens to the bladder? Urethra, smooth sphincter, the muscles of the blood, the sphincter muscles of the bladder. Here, when the bladder is in a relaxed mode, then the sphincter muscle is constricted. Opposite होता है ये, ठीक है? Or here, when it is constricted, the bladder is constricted. It means the muscles is relaxed. The sphincter muscle that stops the urine is relaxed, and you are urinating out. Okay, clear? What happens to the penis? Here, in this case, there is ejaculation. In this case, parasympathetic, there is erection of the penis. Okay. Now, what happens to gallbladder, bile and duct? Here it is relaxed. Here it is in contracted position. Salivary glands. So, concentrated viscous saliva is there, but the saliva in itself is not secreted at a high rate. Okay. And here there is an abundant watery saliva. बहुत ज़्यादा saliva होता है because we are now bringing in digestion. Now nasal and lacrimal glands, nasal glands and the glands in your eyes, what happens? Vasoconstriction. There is a constriction, and here there is abundant secretion. It secretes. Okay. So this table is also very important. Now let's talk about the hormones associated with sympathetic and parasympathetic state. So this is something extra that I am giving you here, that the sympathetic nervous system releases which hormones? Catecholamines. Okay, catecholamines, that is the epinephrine and norepinephrine, okay, to accelerate the heart rate, because we want to accelerate the heart rate. So catecholamines, that is epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay, you learn the spelling very well. I am not able to pronounce it properly today. Now, what happens in the parasympathetic nervous system? It releases the hormone acetylcholine to slow the heart rate. So, in parasympathetic, you have to learn the word acetylcholine. You will learn these things in your chapter when you are doing endocrine glands again. Okay. Now, what happens to the emotions? How emotions are related to autonomic nervous system? So, autonomic nervous system is strongly influenced by emotions such as grief, okay, anger, fear, sexual stimulation, etc. Okay, so this autonomic nervous system is strongly influenced by these emotions. That is why high blood pressure, stomach ulcers and some other troubles may arise, due to long and continued emotional stress. So you have to check your emotional stress levels as well. So this was all about the peripheral nervous system. I hope I was able to make things clear. Okay. Do go ahead and watch our next video also, where I'll be teaching you about the reflexes, and then we will go ahead with the endocrine glands. I hope you have liked today's lecture. So if you have understood everything very well, do write in the comment section what you think about the content and what you want us to come up with. Do subscribe our channel and share this with your friends, and always keep the learning on. Thank you, my dear children.